So we're going to transition to our next guest via Skype, but I want to give our viewers a little bit more context about Rachel's Challenge. He's the founder and CEO of Rachel's Challenge. We had him here on Bold last year, and it was in the aftermath of the horrific shooting down in Florida, and to talk about school shootings, because Rachel's Challenge is committed to helping schools teach empathy. And they have said that according to news reports, they've prevented at least 7 school shootings from this curriculum. And what they do is they go into schools and they help children understand the basics of you know, if they're having an emotional disturbance, what's driving that? Why are you feeling lonely? Why are you feeling bullied? And they make promises to each other to help prevent bullying and to help prevent isolation. And the news reports again say that they've prevented numerous suicides from students who are feeling alone or isolated. And the schools just say that this curriculum is tremendously impactful in bringing schools together. And so we're going to bring him here via Skype. Darrell Scott, he is the founder of Rachel's Challenge, and he's the father of Rachel Joy Scott, who was the first victim of the Columbine shooting. Welcome, Darrell.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Hi, Darrell.
Great to have you.
So tomorrow is the 20-year anniversary of the Columbine shooting. Can you tell us what this means to you and to Rachel's Challenge?
Well, I remember sitting next to my daughter's grave the day that she was buried, telling my wife, I leaned over and I said, I wondered what the next 20 years will be like. And 20 years have passed now. And we had no idea at that time that we would be reaching millions of young people around the country with Rachel's Challenge. But you know, this week is always a very somber week for our family, and it's also a somber week for our whole community. But Rachel's Challenge has grown now to where we reach 1 to 2 million students each year, and we're seeing a lot of difference take place in the lives of young people. We see it. Over 150 suicides prevented every year. We've seen 7 school shootings prevented that we know of. So we're thankful that Rachel's life and legacy didn't end at the Columbine tragedy. It's continued to this day.
And Darrell, what do you think it is about the curriculum that helps prevent the suicides and prevents the school shootings?
It's not the curriculum. We share Rachel's story. It's one of those things that's hard to explain until you experience it. But we've reached 28 million people now in live settings with our 50 presenters who travel all over the country, around the world. And we share in assemblies for an hour her story. And built into her story are a number of challenges for young people. For example, my son Craig was under the desk in the library the day the shooting took place with 2 of his close friends. His 2 buddies were both killed that day. Craig lay there covered in their blood, looking down the barrel of 2 guns. He didn't know that his sister had already been killed outside the school. And he watched as they taunted his friend Isaiah with racial slurs moments before they shot and killed him. And my daughter in her diary wrote, and she said, don't judge people by outward appearance. Look into their soul and look into their heart and not at their appearance. So our first challenge that we give is based on these stories. And it's a challenge to eliminate prejudice. So we give 5 challenges throughout the assembly, and then we follow that up with a training. And we focus a lot on social emotional learning and growth. And the training then ensures that the momentum from the assembly will take place throughout the whole year, because we create a service club with 100 students, and those students do amazing things. For example, in 2010, when the earthquake hit Haiti, we had 7,000 of our Friends of Rachel Club members in Dallas came together to Rockwall, Texas, and packaged over 1 million meals for starving kids in Haiti. And we see a lot of activity like that. So it's not just a matter of inspiring them, but also giving them application. So we're reaching the heart, the head, and the hands.
I think that's wonderful.
And that's what makes a difference.
And I've seen that in Columbine that the school or the community is planning to do a service project that day. And I think turning this tragedy into something to help others is really amazing. But I wanted to ask you, Scott, because since the Columbine shooting, there have been several other school shootings. Do you think that Columbine was really the first mass school shooting that led to copycats?
Well, absolutely it was. Almost every shooter since Columbine has referred back to Columbine in some way. Not all of them, but most of them have. And yes, Columbine was the first mass shooting. There's been 141 students killed in schools since my daughter was killed, and Rachel was the first of those 141 to die. But more tragically, even than school shootings, is that for every one student who's been killed in a school shooting, over 800 students have committed suicide. And that's where we put a lot of our focus, is on helping young people feel self-worth, self-value, understanding who they are, and inspiring them to be the best that they can be.
Wow. So we've also recently saw the New Zealand massacre at a mosque there. In New Zealand, the press and government leaders were reluctant to say the alleged shooter's name to avoid amplifying his message. Do you think this is the right approach, and do you think this helps avoid copycats?
I never got caught up in that controversy. We name the shooters in our school assemblies, but not to glorify them. Their names are just mentioned briefly. Our focus has been on the stories of those who were murdered. So I think the emphasis does need to be more on the victims and their families, and on the survivors, and not on the shooters, because that's just one element. There's a lot of different pieces that go into preventing violence in schools, and some people are focused on hardening the target. Some people are focused on gun control. And I think we need a variety of approaches. Our approach happens to be preventative. We've seen 7 school shootings prevented. These are school shootings you would have heard about on the news, but you didn't, because of Rachel's Challenge. We see over 150 suicides prevented every single year. That's 3 suicides a week prevented. So we know that we are having an impact in the lives of young people, not only here in America, but around the world.
So, Darrell, you mentioned, approaches. Do you think the national media should be more responsible in how they report about school shootings, and to focus more on the victims and their lives instead of the shooters?
Well, we've worked with the media for 20 years, and I understand that you have to go where the story is. So a lot of the criticism toward the media maybe is invalid. I think when you talk about media, you're talking about more than just news. There needs to be less glamorization of murderers and killers, but this expands into movies, it expands into music, it expands into games, expands into all types of entertainment. I think the bigger culprit lies not in the news media, but in some of the entertainment media, which glamorizes violence, death, killing, and all of these things have a toll.
Well, we know that the Columbine shooters were interested in, and they did use violent video games before the shooting.
Yes, they did. Yeah, in fact, people forget that they played one particular game for a full year, and one of the boys actually transported pictures and images of the Columbine students into the game itself as they practiced killing their schoolmates for a full year. They also watched a very violent movie, which they claimed they watched over 100 times, and they emulated the characters from that movie as they came into the school that day.
Wow. Well, how do you then balance that with First Amendment? How would you want to regulate violent video games more extensively?
Well, if you go back to the Founding Father era, they never dreamed that the First Amendment would be used to hide behind to promote and allow this kind of violence and vile activity taking place. I'm not a First Amendment attorney. I'm not going to try to be, but I think that common sense plays a role in this as well. And the First Amendment was meant for the freedom of speech and the freedom of religion. It was not to give us the freedom to blast people, to denigrate people, to do all the things that we see done today. That's my opinion.
Darrell, we have a viewer comment from Stephanie Pelski. She says, God bless Darrell Scott and the Scott family. They faced every parent's greatest nightmare and somehow found strength to help others from it. Amazing.
Well, thank you. We hear from young people and parents all around the world every day. We get emails, phone calls, letters, and we're always grateful that my daughter's life continues to touch theirs.
And we see the picture. We want our viewers to know that's your camera framing is there very particularly to show your daughter's picture there behind you. What's the thing that you want our viewers to know about your daughter?
Rachel was kind, compassionate, but she had a passion for life, and she believed that her life was going to count. She wrote on the back of her dresser when she was 13 years old, she said, "These hands belong to Rachel Joy Scott and will someday touch millions of people's hearts." And that's happened. And one of our challenges to young people is to believe in yourself, to dare to dream, to not ever allow anyone to kill your dreams, and to move ahead in life with a positive attitude. And we see a lot of good come from that.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Darrell Scott, for joining us.